Aid falls short in Gaza as winter looms. U.S. launches Southern Spare mission in South America. Russia court convicts deceased LGBTQ travel agent of extremism. South Africa allows 153 Palestinians to disembark after flight ordeal. Good afternoon. Welcome to The World in 30 Minutes on Politics and Business Television. I am Fatima Abubakar Oibo. Many thanks for joining us. Details of this news stories and more content to come after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now the news in details. Humanitarian groups warn that relief supplies to Gaza remain woefully inadequate, even as heavy rains and the onset of winter worsen conditions for displaced families. Thousands are struggling with limited food, medicine and shelter, while aid convoys face restrictions and delays at border crossings. Relief workers say the situation is dire, with overcrowded shelters and rising health risk among children and the elderly. International agencies are calling for urgent action to scale up deliveries, stressing that the humanitarian response must match the growing needs on the ground. With winter approaching, concerns are mounting that exposure to cold and disease could compound the crisis. Observers say the shortfall in aid underscores the urgent need for sustained access and global solidarity to prevent further suffering in Gaza. Well, the United States is pressing the UN Security Council to adopt its proposed plan for Gaza, which calls for an immediate ceasefire and expanded humanitarian access to civilians trapped in the conflict. American diplomats argue that the initiative is crucial to stabilizing the region and prevent further escalation, stressing that the plan would also lay the groundwork for long-term peace negotiations. The U.S. text emphasized the protection of civilians, the delivery of aid, and the need for international support to rebuild Gaza's devastated infrastructure. Russia, however, has countered its own draft resolution, challenging key aspects of the American proposal and calling for alternative measures that reflect Moscow's position on the crisis. The competing texts have set the stage for a diplomatic showdown within the Council as member states weigh which approach best addresses the humanitarian and political realities on the ground. Observers say the outcome of this debate could significantly shape the international community's role in resolving the Gaza conflict, with both Washington and Moscow vying for influence in the peace process. Meanwhile, the United States has announced the deployment of forces under a new military campaign dubbed Operation Southern Spare. The mission, led the U.S. Southern Command, is aimed at dismantling narco-terrorist networks across South America and the Caribbean. Defense officials say warships, aircraft, and troops have already been mobilized, with reports of strikes on suspected drug vessels in the Caribbean and Pacific waters. Washington insists the operation is necessary to protect its border and curb the flow of narcotics in the country. However, the scale of the deployment has sparked mixed reactions, with some regional governments welcoming U.S. support against cartels, while others warn of possible violations of sovereignty and international law. Analysts say the mission could reshape America's military footprint in Latin America. In the meantime, a UK judge has ruled that mining giant BHP Group is liable for damages stemming from Brazil's 2015 Mariana Dam collapse, considered the country's worst environmental disaster. The catastrophic failure released millions of tons of toxic mining waste into rivers, killing 19 people, destroying villages, and contaminating water supplies across 2 states. The case, brought by more than 700,000 Brazilian claimants, marks a significant step in holding multinational corporations accountable for environmental harm beyond their borders. The ruling paves the way for one of the largest class action claims in UK legal history, with compensation potentially running into billions of pounds. Lawyers representing victims say the judgment sends a strong message about corporate responsibility, while BHP was indicated it will continue to contest aspects of the case. Environmental groups have welcomed the decision, calling it a milestone in the fight for justice for communities devastated by the disaster. A Moscow court has posthumously found Andrei Kotov, a 48-year-old LGBTQ travel agent, guilty of extremism nearly a year after his death in custody. Kotov, who ran the travel company Men Travel, was arrested in November 2024 and later died in a pre-trial detention center in December of that year. Riot groups say he had reported being beaten and tortured during his arrest, and his death was widely believed to be linked to mistreatment while in custody. The Golovinsky District Court ruled that Kotov had engaged in extremist activities connected to Russian ban on the so-called international LGBT movement, and also accused him of using minors for pornography. Human rights activists have condemned the ruling as a symbolic escalation of Russia's crackdown on LGBT communities under President Vladimir Putin. Observers know that convicting someone posthumously underscores the severity of the government's campaign against individuals it claims undermine traditional values. Well, Russian missile and drone attacks have struck Ukraine, killing at least 5 people in the capital city of Kyiv and 2 more in the southern port town of Konomorsk. Local authorities report that residential buildings and critical infrastructure were damaged, with emergency services working through the night to rescue survivors and contain fire sparks by the bombardment. Ukrainian officials have condemned the strikes as deliberate targeting of civilians, while international leaders renewed calls for stronger support to help Ukraine defend itself. The attacks highlight the ongoing intensity of the conflict as communities across the country continue to face devastating losses from Russia's military campaign. In another development, health authorities in Cuba are intensifying efforts to contain a growing wave of mosquito-borne illnesses, including dengue fever, chikungunya. Officials report a sharp rise in cases across several provinces, prompting emergency fumigation campaigns, public awareness drives, and the deployment of medical teams to affected communities. The outbreak has been linked to heavy rains and poor drainage systems, which have created breeding grounds for mosquitoes. The government is urging citizens to take preventive measures such as clearing stagnant water and using protective nets, while hospitals brace for increased patient admissions. International health organizations are monitoring the situation closely, warning that the spread of these diseases could strain Cuba's healthcare system if not swiftly contained. The crisis underscores the urgent need for stronger public health infrastructure and sustained mosquito control programs. You're still watching The World in 30 Minutes live on Politics and Business Television. Still to come, deadly landslides strike Indonesia's Java Island. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Indian government has officially described the recent blast in Delhi as an act of terror, sparking heightened security measures across the capital and other major cities. Investigators say the explosion, which left several injured and caused panic in the busy district, bears the hallmarks of a coordinated attack. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has convened high-level security meetings, directing intelligence agencies and law enforcement to intensify probes and ensure those responsible are swiftly brought to justice. Officials indicate that India's response will likely include tightening surveillance, boosting counter-terror operations, and strengthening cooperation with international partners to track extremist networks. Security forces have already increased patrols in sensitive areas, while the National Investigation Agency is leading efforts to uncover the perpetrators. Analysts say the government's firm stance signals a broader commitment to safeguarding citizens and sending a clear message that acts of terror will not go unanswered. Violence has broken out in parts of Bangladesh as supporters of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's party took to the streets to protest the ongoing crackdown trial against its leaders. Demonstrators clashed with police in Dhaka and other major cities, with reports of vehicles being set ablaze and security forces firing tear gas to disperse crowds. The unrest follows months of political tension after Hasina was toppled from power, leaving her party in turmoil and its members facing charges of corruption and abuse of office. Authorities say the trial is necessary to restore accountability, but opposition figures argue it is politically motivated and aimed at silencing Hasina's loyalists. Human rights groups have expressed concern over the escalating violence, warning that a crackdown could deepen divisions and destabilize the country further. The government has vowed to maintain order, while analysts caution that the protests may intensify as the trial progresses. At least 2 people have been confirmed dead and 21 others reported missing following devastating landslides on Indonesia's Java island. Heavy rains triggered the disaster, sweeping through villages and destroying homes, while rescue teams continue to battle difficult terrain in search of survivors. Authorities say the landslides occurred in mountainous areas prone to flooding, leaving communities cut off in urgent need of aid. Emergency officials have deployed personnel and equipment to assist with rescue operations, while local residents have been evacuated to safer ground. The government has urged caution as more rain is forecast, raising fears of additional landslides. Humanitarian groups are also mobilizing to provide relief supplies as the tragedy underscores the vulnerability of Indonesia's rural communities to extreme weather events. Back to Africa, South African authorities have permitted 153 Palestinian passengers to disembark at Johannesburg's O.R. Tambo International Airport after a 10 to 12-hour ordeal aboard a chartered plane. The passengers who had arrived from Gaza were initially held on the aircraft due to immigration and security clearance delays, sparking concerns over their welfare. Officials later confirmed that the group was allowed entry on humanitarian grounds with arrangements made for temporary accommodation and support. The incident has drawn international attention, highlighting South Africa's continued role in offering refuge and solidarity to Palestinians amid the ongoing Middle East crisis. Meanwhile, the government of Ivory Coast has announced a major reinforcement of its northern border following what officials describe as an unusual flow of refugees arriving from neighboring Mali. Security agencies have been directed to intensify patrols and surveillance along entry points as thousands of displaced persons continue to cross into Ivorian territory. Authorities say the move is not only to manage the humanitarian situation, but also to guard against possible infiltration by armed groups linked to Mali's ongoing instability. While Ivory Coast has pledged to provide relief and shelter for genuine refugees fleeing conflict, officials stress that tighter controls are necessary to protect communities and maintain national stability. Humanitarian organizations are already mobilizing to assist the influx, but analysts warn that a sudden surge could strain resources and heighten regional tensions. The government insists that the measures are secure against external threats. And that wraps up the program. But before we